Geopolitics and Empire is joined by Guy Mettan, who is a journalist and Swiss politician, former director and editor-in-chief of the main Geneva newspaper, Tribune de Genève, executive director of the Geneva Press Club, and columnist for various Swiss newspapers. Since 2001, he's been a member of the Geneva Parliament, was Speaker of the Parliament in 2010, and is author of several books, two from Clarity Press, which we'll be discussing today, Creating Russophobia, From the Great Religious Schism to Anti-Putin Hysteria, and Europe's Existential Dilemma, To Be or Not to Be an American Vassal. Hello and welcome, Mr. Mettan.
Hello, good to see you. I'm happy to talk with you today.
Yeah, thank you for taking the time. And, I wanted to talk about both of your books and themes of, what's going on in Ukraine and the new Cold War on Russia, as well as the EU project itself. And both are very important right now and interlinked. You've said the West has engaged in more or less violent hostilities for 1,000 years against Russia. And this is something no one seems to talk about today. People are forgetting, the media doesn't talk about this, from Napoleon and Hitler to the US, EU, and NATO today. It's clear much of the aggression, much of the time has come from the West against Russia. Could you kind of help us understand the current conflict and what's going on with Ukraine, the conflict, this war, and why Russia is so hated?
Yeah. So thank you for the question. It's a very long story, as you said. It's in my view a thousand years old story, because I think the roots of this conflict we can see now in Ukraine are very deeply rooted in history in Europe, and in my view, everything has started with 1,200 years ago, when a new emperor came into power here in Europe. The name of this emperor was Charlemagne, Charles the Great, and he was the first one. He was a German, and he was the first one to restore. He wanted to restore the old Roman Empire, which collapsed at the 5th century after Jesus Christ, and this guy was a conqueror. He was a blood maker, if I can say, because he killed a lot of people to conquer his new states. In Germany, it was in South Germany and north of France. His capital was Aix-la-Chapelle, Aachen, now in Germany. And this guy wanted to change the religion. Because it was the Orthodox religious at the time, and the Pope. Everybody was Orthodox in Europe or in the East, in Jerusalem, Turkey, and so on, in Constantinople. But this guy wanted to change the composition of the Trinity. You have the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. He wanted to change a little bit the thing. It's ideological fight for him in order to have a common ideology, new religious ideology for his states. But he could not succeed. He succeeded to become an emperor because he helped the Pope to reconquer his seat, the Holy Seat in Rome. And he could become emperor, but he could not change the religion. This change came 1 century, 50 years later, in the 10th century, when a new German prince called Otto was able also to gather European states and to create a new empire. It was the Holy Roman German Empire. And he wanted also to change the religion. He could not succeed at first. His successor was able to do it 50 years later, and it was the religious schism. We have told just a few minutes, which happened in the 11th century. Why this remembering of the history? Because this religious schism between Catholic people who became Catholic, it was in the Western Europe, and the Orthodox in the eastern part of Europe, in Greece and Byzantine Empire, was the first divide of Europe, of the Christian world, let's say, in two parts. And now we can still see that in Ukraine. For instance, in Ukraine, you have also this same division between the Unyat, we call the Unyats in Ukraine, in the West Ukraine. These people are from Orthodox right, but they are submitted to Catholic Pope in Rome. They depend on the Pope. And the eastern part of Ukraine is still remain, they stay pure Orthodox. And you have this divide, this gap, just in the middle of Ukraine. So it's a very 1,000-year history. We can see always today, until today, the importance of this topic, even now in the modern Ukraine. I just mentioned that to remember how deep is this divide, because after the collapse of the Greek Christianity, of the Eastern Christianity, the collapse of Constantinople, with the Ottoman, with the Turks at the 15th century, the heritage of the Orthodox Christianity and the heritage of the Byzantine Empire was transferred to Moscow, because it was Moscow who take into account as a heritage all this religious and political, it was the follow-up, if I can say. And the hate between Catholic and Orthodox was also transferred to the Russian after the collapse of the Byzantine. So we can see how the hate of the Eastern or the Orthodox has migrated during centuries.
A message from our sponsors. It seems we're headed for economic collapse, a dystopian social credit system, even another world war. As a longtime expat myself, I've secured multiple passports, getaway locations, foreign financial accounts, and escaped to the sunnier shores of Mexico. Mikhail Thorup of the Expat Money Show can help you do the same and become Great Reset proof. He's hosting the Expat Money Summit with 30-plus experts that'll help you reclaim your freedom in a time of upheaval and uncertainty by moving your life, business, and wealth offshore. Themes include securing your Plan B safe haven, offshore banking, decentralized finance, second passports, and much more. Protect yourself and secure a new life abroad. Register now for free at expatmoneysummit.com, or don't, and enjoy eating bug burgers in your smart city. If you do find yourself stuck in a smart city, the Nomos app will help you survive COVID-1984 and the Great Reset. Nomos is a time bank that can be used by communities anywhere in the world. You just need to talk people into using it. I've spoken to the developer who is passionate about creating solutions for surviving and thriving in the apocalypse. Nomos is available in English and Spanish, so hurry and visit nomos.net before they roll out the cashless society and put you in the algorithm ghetto. And don't forget to fund Geopolitics and Empire. You can leave a donation, except on Patreon or PayPal, which have banned us, book a consultation, or become a member.
And it's interesting also to notice that in the modern times, in the late 18th century, it was the French king, Louis XV, who rediscovered, if I can say, the Russophobia, because he married a Polish princess, and so he take the Polish, the Polish view of the world, very anti-Russian, in his mind. And this guy has forged a fake document called the fake testament of Peter the Great, Tsar Peter the Great. It was completely faked, but this paper, this faked paper, was saying that the mission of the Tsar was, of the heirs of Peter the Great, was to conquer the Europe, France, Germany, Italy, and so on. Completely fake, but Napoleon, because Napoleon was angry with the Tsar, they were friends, but after the divide, they had conflict, and Napoleon rediscovered his fake document and he published it in 1812 because he wanted to make a war against the Tsar, Alexander I, and he has to justify, to find a reason or to invent a reason. So he published this fake testament saying, oh, look, the mission of the historical missions of the Tsar is to conquer Germany, France, and all the Europe. So I have we have to make, as a French power, to make a preemptive war against the Russians in order to stop them, to conquer them. We have to attack Russia at first before they will attack us and conquer us. And it was the Napoleon expedition in Russia. Unfortunately for Napoleon, he was beaten, he was defeated, and he has to surrender. So that's what we can say, the emerging of the modern Russophobia through the French king and after the French Emperor Napoleon. So maybe I am too long, but you know, this forged document, this fake testament was after the Napoleonic Wars, was translated into English by the British ideologues, the British imperialists. Just after the Treaty of Vienna in 1815, after 1815, and why? Because after Napoleon was defeated, there were two victory nations. One was Great Britain with Nelson, you know, Trafalgar, the Battle of Trafalgar, and General Wellington, and the other victory power was Russia, the Tsar Alexander. So two victors, yes, and the British were very happy. Then the Russians were helping them to defeat Napoleon. But after the victory, it was a problem for them because they didn't wish to share, you know, the victory with the Russian. So they started to develop a new Russophobia within Great Britain. That's the reason why they translated the fake testament of Peter the Great for saying to the British public opinion, oh, look at this document. The Russian, they helped us to fight against Napoleon. But now they will to conquer, they will to be expansionist. So we have also to defend ourselves and to make the war with them. And they did it, you know, we can see when we read, for instance, the Times newspaper, London Times, and so on, saying this kind of forgery becoming more and more successful with some cartoons designing the Tsar as a vampire, you know, as with big teeth, because you can see London Tower, London St. Paul Cathedral with the Tsar and vampire flying on London with big teeth to suck the poor British citizen, you know. So that kind of propaganda, and it was quite successful because what happened in 1853, the British, with the help of the French, they invade Russia and they made the first Crimean War in 1853 during 2-3 years, it was big war, quite an important war, because it was also kind of with the help of Turkey too, so 3-4 countries against Russia, as we can say now. So not yet NATO, but kind of the same partners, if we can say that. So we can say this Russophobia migrating from France to Great Britain. And it's also funny to remark that Dracula, the Dracula, the novel of Dracula, it was written, the book was written in the 1870 years. It was 1878, I think, the first publication. And Dracula was the caricature of the Tsar, because at that time, the Carpathian place where Dracula was supposed to live belonged to the Russian Empire. So it was a propaganda novel against the Russian. We have forgotten that now because now Romania is no more Russia, but at the time it was written, this Dracula book, just as a propaganda tool against the Russian by the British imperialists from the 19th century. And after that, we can see that the Russophobia migrated from Great Britain to Germany. Why? Because at the end of the 19th century, the German Empire was built after the victory against France at the Versailles, the Château de Versailles in 1870. And at the time, 20 years later, Germany was completely built up. The empire was completely integrated, and the German emperor has observed, okay, we have the empire, we are the first power in continental Europe, but we have no colonies. So it's unjust, because everybody in the world has colonies in Africa, in Asia, and so on, but we have nothing. The Spanish of Latin America, the British and the French Africa, the Holland has Indonesia, Malaysia, but we have nothing. So, but everything is occupied. We have something, maybe some countries in Africa, but that's not enough. And they developed the idea of German expansion in the Eastern Europe, in Ukraine and in Russia. And that's why they developed a new kind of Russophobia, German Russophobia, saying, oh, our Lebensraum, our vital space will be in Eastern Europe. And we can see the German propagandists, the German ideologists, the German geopolitician developing this Drang nach Osten, in German language, this push to the east, to translate Drang nach Osten, in Ukraine and Germany. And Hitler, the German emperor, tried to do it during the First World War, and Hitler took these same ideas and transformed that into a racist one, and he tried to do it during the Second World War. But unfortunately, or fortunately, Germany, or Nazi Germany, was defeated in 1945. So the dream of Hitler collapsed by chance, and it collapsed thanks to the Soviets, thanks to the Russians, the USSR. And in the 1945, we have exactly the same pictures as we had in 1850 after the Napoleonic War. We have two big victors, victory powers. One was United States, and the other one, the communist Russia, the USSR. And exactly the same thing happened after 1945, because the United States were very happy to see that the Soviet has defeated Hitler with 26 million people dead, with 26 million victims in Soviet, and only 200,000 American soldiers who died in Europe. So the main victor power against Hitler was not United States, but USSR. If you look only the figures.
Yeah, Mr. I wanted to jump a bit forward. Yeah. You're one of the few that really lays out this foundation, and this is crucial, I think, to understand. No one's talking about this, and it's just in many ways history repeating itself. Empire and these different cycles, and then just kind of to jump forward to today. Many people know it's well known, and we don't need to get into. If we go from the 2000s until today, what's happening? The 2004, we had the Orange Color Revolution, and 2014, we had the Maidan coup. Where Canada and U.S. and all these NGOs basically took control of Ukraine, and they've been using it as a battering ram to go for Russia. We see like the Rand Corporation 2019 white paper. It seems like they really want to try to destroy Russia again and subjugate it completely. And then to get your thoughts on today, 2022, how you see the events in Ukraine. For a while, my view is, in your books, you've talked about Yugoslavia as well. I'm Croatian. As a child, I spent 1994 in Croatia during part of the war. And I feel that Ukraine right now the West wants Ukraine, the war to continue. It will become like a Yugoslavia-like situation where it will go on for years. But it seems like they are willing to risk, world war. Again, what are your thoughts on what's happening today, the situation in Ukraine?
Yeah, no, just to finish in 1 minute. After 1945, we have this United States and USSR as victor. But what happened? United States didn't want to share the victor with the USSR, and they started the Cold War against communism. And what happened 40 years later, in the end of the 80s, when the USSR collapsed, disappeared, normally they should end NATO, because NATO was built against against the communism, against the Soviet state. But as soon as the Soviet state disappeared, collapsed, there were no more ground for maintaining NATO. But it didn't happen. Why? Because even if United States was the victor power of the Cold War, it was not enough for them, because they started what we call the globalization, and to ensure the US hegemony on the world, there were still a big stone in the shoe that was still Russia. Even if Russia was poor with the Yeltsin time in the 90s, the years 90s, were very economically depressed and so on, but it was not enough for United States to get this still very big country alive. So they tried, as you said, as you mentioned, not to close NATO, but to develop it. Because in 1991, there were only 15 countries members of NATO. And today, there are 30 countries. So the double. In a peacetime, when the enemy disappeared, collapsed, despite of that, NATO doubled. So that's because United States wanted absolutely to contain Russian threat. And everything started from there. Because when Yeltsin passed away and Putin came into power, rebuilt the Russian economy, making Russia strong again with an army, with a pretty strong economy, and so on. It was unacceptable for the United States. That's why they followed the development of NATO and also the containment of Russia. It was President Bush, the Brzezinski book, The Great Chessboard, written in 1997, saying, we have to conquer Ukraine because Ukraine is the pivotal power in Europe. So we absolutely have to conquer Ukraine, because if Ukraine remain in the Russian orbit, in the Russian sphere of influence, it will give too big power to Russia. So we have to take it in order to cut the influence of Russia, the power of Russia in Western Europe. And that was the purpose of Madeleine Albright, Brzezinski, Wolfowitz, all the neoconservatives at the time. And they just applied the plan. They just realized the plan they conceived in the 90s. And step by step, it was built. The first big friction, if I can say, happened in 2006 when George W. Bush announced at the NATO summit in 2006, the first time he expressed the idea that Ukraine and Georgia could be member of NATO. It was a red line for the Russian. And just a few months later, in 2007, President Putin at the Munich Conference on Security said very firmly, we cannot accept that Ukraine and Georgia will belong to NATO, because for us, it's just a question of existential. It's a vital problem for us. So it's a red line. We cannot accept that. It was the first time, so 15 years ago, that Putin said that to the Western countries, to the NATO countries. But he was not heard, not at all, because what happened a few months after the Munich conference, in April 2008, the NATO summit officially invited Ukraine and Georgia, opened the door to Ukraine and Georgia. And just after that, 4 months later, in August 2008, United States supported the attack of Georgia in Ossetia against Russia. If you remember, in August 2008, when Putin was participating to the opening ceremony of the Beijing Olympic Games, the Georgian has seized the opportunity, saying, Putin is in Beijing, the Russian are probably drinking some vodka, so we can attack, because they got the permission of the United States, of their supporter, and they did it. But unfortunately for them, Russians were very attentive, they were awake, and they have beaten the Georgian. But, so we can see this progressive aggressivity from NATO, supported by or led by United States against Russia. And after you have the Maidan coup and the rest. Yeah.
And where do you think this will lead? I mean, we have even Lavrov recently talking about, the threat of World War III. We've got the West, we've got commentators in the U.S. insisting on direct conflict with Russia. They're sending arms. I think this week, the Congress just approved a lot of money.
No, you are quite right. Just to explain, I insist a little bit on history, even if it is not very popular, but I think it could be interesting, just to see how deep is this divide, and why the fight, why the war we can see now in Ukraine is something, very, very deep in the guts, if I can say, of the Ukrainian people of the West, but also for the Russian, obviously. But you are right. We are not in a new Cold War. It was we are in a new Third World War, if I can say, with this Ukrainian fight. I don't think it will a total war with nuclear strikes and so on, because every party is aware of the risk, of the dangers of a nuclear war. But it will be a global war, implying all the countries, all the world in it. First, the Europeans, the Americans, the NATO with Canada, Japan, and all the allies of the United States and the European world, the Western world, but also China. So, and India and the non-aligned countries, everybody will be impacted by this war, as we can say, because of energy, of fertilizer, of wheat and agriculture production, and so on. Prices going up and so on. So for me, it's the first battle of the Third World War, if I can say. It's not. This war is regional, if I can say, is local between Ukraine and Russia for the domination or for the liberation of the Donbass and the Russian-speaking people in Ukraine, in the eastern Ukraine. But it's also a global, unlimited war. I prefer to speak of unlimited war, not total, because it's unlimited in space, as all the world will be will take part, if I can say, from one step. Depend but economically or not forcefully, not obviously military, but also economically and so on. Unlimited in space, but unlimited also in time, because I don't think this war will finish now. I think the peace is now impossible between the two camps. After the Bucha affair, the Bucha supposed crimes of war, crimes against humanity, genocide, they said, by Joe Biden said, I think it's impossible to make peace, because the hatred, the hate between the two countries is so high that now it's impossible. Even, I live in Geneva, Switzerland, even in Switzerland, because this Bucha affair was created, it was a mise en scène in English. It was not fake, because all these people died from the war.
Would you say false flag operation?
Oh, yes, exactly. False flag operation, that kind of thing, like a scenery. It was created in order to make the public opinion in the Western country, in Ukraine for sure, but also in Western country, so hysterically anti-Russian, just to impede any chance to break any chance of peace, to make this war unlimited in the time. And same for the Russian, because now in the Donbass, in the parts of Ukraine, let's say occupied or liberated by the Russian, Kherson in south, it's impossible to come back into Ukrainian government, because with these Azov battalions, with these far-right or neo-Nazi people, they will kill everybody. If they win, they will kill everybody now, because everybody in that parts of Ukraine will be suspected of betrayal or to be accomplice of the Russian, and they will be killed. So it's the division, the separation of Ukraine in two parts now is done, and it's impossible to go to come back, to the old unified Ukraine because of that. So it's unlimited in space, in time, and also in the team, because it will involve all the aspects of the human activities. It will be a military war, it will be an economic war, it will be a cultural war, as we can say with the interdiction of Dostoevsky, Tchaikovsky, all the Russian authors and writers in the West. So it's a cultural war. It's also a religious war, as I explained, in the beginning of this talk. And it's also a propaganda war, an information war, as also, because propaganda is very strong on both sides. So it's a kind of, multi-specters, if I can say, war. So that's why it will not end in the coming months, even in the coming years. All what we can hope is to have a kind of frozen conflict, but peace, I think, will not happen before years and years.
I would agree with you. I want to get your thought on the information war aspect. I mean, you've worked as a journalist and in media for many years, and I'm a Croatian citizen. I'm an American, so I'm a European American, and we're told that the West is this democratic, space, freedom, and all of this. And I'm experiencing that it's a total lie. Like the West is becoming totalitarian.
Exactly,
in your book, you've said the West is not the most beautiful in the world. The censorship is insane. Last year I was terminated from Patreon, which was one way for people to send me money to do this podcast. 2 weeks ago, the Department of Homeland Security in America created the Ministry of Truth, like in 1984, and the Disinformation Governance Board. That same week, I was banned from PayPal. And just yesterday, Spotify, one of the most popular podcast channels, started taking down episodes of my podcast. And you've talked about journalists paralyzed by the fear of losing their jobs. And it's crazy what's happening in America and Europe. They've taken down Russia Today channels, and my own government and these American companies are censoring me, an American, just for having a podcast, just for talking, having conversations with people like yourself. What do you make of this in the West?
No. But for me, I was surprised. Not exactly surprised, because I think it's already a 10 years or 15 years trend, this new or neo-totalitarian trend, as we can say. It happens since a few years with the fact checkers and the debunkers, which are just the police of the net. They are just the Gestapo of the net. These guys are not there to make the real facts existing or to show the reality. They are just there to make the police and to impede the people like you or me who are trying to give to give a broader view of the situation, let's say, because as a journalist, what I try to do is not to say Putin is right or Russia is good, because it's not the news, it's not interesting. It's just to say, please have a broader vision of the world. Look at all the situation. Look at the whole picture, not only a small part as it is shown by the Western media, the Western press, and so on. So we live now in such a propagandistic information war that it's very hard for you, for me, yes, to exist. What I try, because you mentioned the democracy. For me, it's just a false flag, the democracy or the human rights, because the Western powers have always a democracy and human rights in the mouth, on the lips. All the time they mention, we are fighting for democracy and human rights. That's not true. We have seen what was signification, the meaning of democracy in Yugoslavia, in Syria, in bombing Iraq 2 times, bombing Afghanistan, invasion of Libya, and so on. It was not to bring the democracy. It was to bring the chaos, because all these countries are living in full chaos. So it's no democracy at all. And in the same time, we are supporting Saudi Arabia, which is not precisely a model of democracy. So that's just fake. But this double standard speech is playing well, because it's convincing the Western public opinion that the right is with them, with us, if we can say. That's not true, but it functions. What I try to do as a journalist is to keep borderline, if I can say. I try to write in the official or mainstream newspaper regularly, not to be expelled, if I can say, as a complotist, as fact of complotist, or
they say conspiracy theorist, right?
Conspiracy theorist, and so on. So just to keep the line just at the border, at the limit, if I can say, in order to keep audible, if I can say, to keep because what I am a pessimistic about the future development of our world into a totalitarian new empire, if I can say. But I am also optimistic, because I think the light of the truth, even if it is small, even if it is only a candle, let's say like that, this brings light. And if you can have some truth, this truth will be repeated maybe with few people, but the rumor of truth will also expand. If we say, I like to make a comparison also, sorry for you, but with the history. In the Christian, the beginnings of the Christian times in the Roman Empire, these Christians were the dissidents of the time. They were against the mainstream imperial Rome. They have to live in catacombs. They have to hide themselves in forests, in poor place in the cities, a little bit like us today as a minority. But they won, because years after years, they were able to expand this small light to more and more people. So I think it's the duty we have to maintain this light enlightened, if I can say, even if it is not so, it's not so, we have no big gift, we are not gifted or we are not rewarded for that.
You're one of the few people. This is the first time I've heard it put the way that you have put it, and it actually gives me optimism that, as you say, even if the truth is just one candle left, I don't think it can ever be fully, removed, and that gives us optimism to keep on going and keep doing what we are doing. And I'm also in agreement with you. I'm very pessimistic about the future. I feel much of the world is moving towards a totalitarianism, a brave new world. In your book, you talk about the U.S. transitioning from an imperial republic towards a new empire. And if we use the example of Europe, your second book, we don't have too much time to fully get into it. I recommend people buy your books, but to talk about Europe, I've interviewed Voltaire Network's Thierry Meyssan not long ago. He said that he believed one of the purposes of Ukraine was the conflict was for the U.S. to weaken the EU and Europe, not to allow it strategic autonomy, so it would remain under the American Empire's wing. As well, I question the roots of
exactly what I explained in my book. Yes.
Yeah.
To make Europe as a vassal of United States, a pure vassal. Yeah.
Yeah, and I also I've always questioned the roots of the EU. In your book, you talk about you have a chapter called European Technocratic Dictatorship. You quote, what if the plans for Europe imagined under the Nazi occupation were the unsettling prehistory of our democratic European construction? Soviet dissidents such as Bukowski, who you cite, have dubbed the EU the new European Soviet. And even now, I just read this week, the EU wants to create a total surveillance of all of our emails and phone chats. So you will have no privacy. And so it's really not looking good. What are your thoughts on the EU?
No. But I think, I was a supporter of EU 40 years ago, because 40 years ago, it was, it was, in my view, a solution against the civil wars in Europe and so on. But after the after the collapse of USSR from the 90s, how can I say, the soul of Europe has completely changed, has shifted into a neoliberal power in art, economy centered institution of organization, and so it was an economic totalitarianism, neoliberal or ultra-liberal, ultra-capitalist, and now it has shifted into a political one, ideological one, informational one. So, and it will not stop. It will not stop because with the development also of the oligarchies, of the oligarchs, we say, there are oligarchs in Russia, but the oligarchs are between us, are at home, and this social class will never leave the power, will never abandon the power. So it will happen exactly during what happened in the Roman times with the development of transformation of the Roman Republic 2,000 years ago into an empire, a totalitarian empire. It's exactly what we can see now. And Europe is following this path under the United States umbrella. I was hoping, dreaming that Europe could resist to that, could transform itself not into a vassal of the United States, but as an autonomous, an independent, neutral organization or continent, able to make the balance between United States and China. United States and China are the two rising powers, if I can say. So we need, for the security of the world, we need a third power. It could be Europe, just to bring a kind of balance between the two. Because if we have only two competitors, probably one time they will make a war between them. But if you have multipolar world, as Russia also wished, but also other countries like India, like Brazil, or Europe. If Europe could play this role of a third part, a kind of arbiter, a kind of counterbalancing power between China and Europe, the world would become much more secure. But unfortunately, this is not what Europe is doing. As we can say in the Ukraine war, Europe has taken side with the United States, is even more hysterical than the Americans in that conflict. Europe will want more sanctions, deliver more weapons to the Ukrainians. So it's completely crazy for me. That's why I am very pessimistic about the destiny of my continent, if I can say.
I would agree with you, and just along those lines, I mean, I see some contradictions, not in what you're saying, but just I'm making observations where in your book you've talked about Europe being solely on the way to third worldization, that the day is perhaps not far off because there's this huge inequality. We're seeing it globally.
Yeah.
You know, we're seeing it in the U.S., here in Mexico. I mean, the economy globally is just declining, and it's like the middle class is being wiped out, and we've got the ultra elites, oligarchs, as you say,
Yeah.
and this,
and the quality of the infrastructures, the railroad, the roads, the schooling also, it's collapsing. The level of the schooling, of the education is collapsing in the Western world. You can see now that the Korean, the Indians are better in mathematics, in physics, and many science better than us. So because the level is going down, that's also a bad sign for the future.
Yeah, I would agree. I mean, I worked in education for more than a decade in Kazakhstan.
Yeah.
I was working and here in Mexico, and just to kind of get your view on where it and you say that history shows us that there are two alternatives. Both are disastrous. That the decline of the republic and its transformation into a repressive totalitarian regime. As you said, the EU. And America as well. A lot of people say the U.S. empire is declining, collapsing, the dollar is losing its status. So kind of like in the West, in the U.S. and EU, there's talk of them declining economically, collapsing, even civil war. Yet at the same time, I mean, you talk about this new empire rising, and I'm trying to understand. I can see both. I can see in one way the Western empire does seem to be strong, but at the same time, there are a lot of these cracks appearing.
Yes.
How do you evaluate that?
Yeah, no, that's apparently contradictory. You know, we have an expansion of the empire and also a kind of the intern collapse. But what happens is that when such an evolution can be observed, it's a kind of militarization of the empire. Because you need more and more police, you need more and more army in order to maintain the angry citizens. You know, the Gilets jaunes, for instance, in France, because the social classes who are excluded from the prosperity is stolen by the upper class. So these people are more and more angry because they have no chance of development for their children. They have less and less medical care, they have less money, and so on. So, in order to keep these people quiet, you need strong police or strong army, because police and army, it's just the two legs of the same security state, you know. And we are living since the 9/11, we are living in our countries in the West in more and more policy or police
state. Yeah.
Yes, exactly. And we have, for instance, emergency. We are living on emergency state, you know, because we have the parliaments have voted emergency laws, you know, emergency law because of terrorism, war against terrorism. Now it's war against Russia, it was war against COVID-19. Every 2 years or every 3 years, you have a new war against a new enemy, because you need an enemy to to strengthen the police and to make the citizen, just quiet and obeyful. Yeah, that's the future I am fearing for us in the coming years. But let's keep optimistic too, because we have to keep the world. We have to open.
Just one more comment on that. Just got another question or two left. As you said, as they said, definitely. And next week I'll be speaking to Professor William Robinson, who has a book about the global police state. But you've mentioned in your book, like, these digital technologies, the fourth industrial revolution. It seems that they will try to use some of these digital technologies to try to control us. Like, the EU is now creating this digital ID, this digital passport. We saw during the pandemic, you were not allowed to go into some countries like supermarkets or travel without your phone, with the passport. What are your thoughts on this? It's like a Chinese social credit system. Any thoughts on these digital technologies that will be used to control us?
That's exactly the point, because we like to denounce the policy state of the Chinese, but we are applying exactly the same receipts. So that's the problem. That's the problem. And I am a supporter because I met Julian Assange, twice. He came in 2010 in the Swiss Press Club when I was the director, and in 2015 I visited him in his Ecuadorian embassy in London. So I met him twice. I am a big supporter because he was the first one, after Snowden did the same a few years later, but Assange was the first whistleblower saying, pay attention. We are living in a new surveillance world. He was quite right. He said that 30 years ago, 12 years ago. And now we are just seeing exactly what he has announced 12 years ago, just in our life, just today, with the QR code and everything. And also the phone, everything is under control, and we have no more privacy. That's finished for a long time. But I am sure we will find, underground way to survive, or to go behind the obstacle, or upon the obstacle. Yeah.
Like the
I don't know how. I don't know yet how and when, but we will do it.
Like the Christians in the catacombs, and to end on
exactly.
on the more.
And
go ahead.
I know what I think. What is important for me, when we are a few people to say that, it's important for me to get personal links, to make a community. Because why, for me, the early Christians could survive? Because they were very strong as a community. They share not only the values and the religion and so on, but they share a deep sense of community, of human relations, let's say like that. That's very important, because if you feel completely alone in your office, I am feeling completely alone in my small place in Geneva, I am completely lost. But if we can talk as we are doing now, we create a community. Other people will join, maybe not a lot, but supporting. And I think that's really important. It's like the candlelight, this kind of, because what this new regime is trying to do is to destroy the human community, the human being. So if we are able to maintain, we will we will win one day.
That's what they tried to do the last 2 years with this biosecurity state.
Exactly.
Social distancing, isolate everyone, lockdown, which is a prison term. So if you have any final thought for us, as you said, how do citizens prepare for the tough times ahead, resisting tyranny, fighting for a better future, better Europe, better world? I think you already gave one of the key advices, which was, keep telling the truth, hold on to that little candle, and community. I think that's one of the most important things.
No, yes, keep the truth alive together, if I can say. Yeah.
All right. Is there any? I really haven't found much presence of you online. Are there any? Where are the best places to find you online, or what books or projects should we know about?
I am not very active online, because I am more writer, so I write articles, I publish articles in the papers, but I have not so many podcasts, to be frank, and unfortunately they are in French until now. Mm-hmm. But as you can say, my English is not so good, but I try, but it's not so good, so I have to improve it to make some podcasts in English. But thanks to you, I will try to do that. Yeah.
Well, there's no problem there. My French is absolutely horrible. And where were you've got a few books in English. I think we can get them from Clarity Press or Amazon. Yeah?
Yes. That's the you mentioned Creating Russophobia and Europe's Existential Dilemma for the moment in English. They've been published in China too, in Russia. The first one also in Sweden, in Italy, and in other countries, but only 2 in English for now. But we will continue anyway.
Yes, keep on fighting the good fight. And again, I would tell everyone to buy Guy Mettan's books. The links will be in the description from Clarity Press, Amazon, or wherever. And merci for being on Geopolitics and Empire.
Thank you for you, and please keep in touch. We can exchange as you like, as often as you wish. Yeah, with pleasure for me.
I hope you enjoyed this Geopolitics and Empire podcast. The website is geopoliticsandempire.com, and I encourage you to sign up for the free email list that goes out with each podcast and every weekend with a collection of news headlines. The newsletter and website are our last lines of defense. We're being censored and deplatformed. It's nearly impossible to find Geopolitics and Empire on the Google search engine. We've been blacklisted. YouTube frequently takes down our videos with strikes. Facebook restricts our page. Reddit and Twitter take down posts. And after the Associated Press mentioned Geopolitics and Empire in a 2021 article co-written with NATO, our Patreon account was terminated. Vimeo also terminated our Pro account. The best free way to help Geopolitics and Empire is to leave a review on Apple Podcasts or elsewhere and subscribe to all of our media channels. You can find the video broadcast now on 5 platforms: Odyssey, Rockfin, Rumble, BitChute, and Brighteon. You can find the audio broadcast on the podcast ecosystem: SoundCloud, Apple, Spotify, and so on. My current favorite social media channels are Twitter and Telegram, but you can also find us on Gab, MeWe, Minds, Float, VK, Instagram, Facebook, and LinkedIn. Finally, Geopolitics and Empire is in dire need of funding to continue. You can leave a donation, purchase a consultation with the host, or become a member to receive additional benefits. We also produce a weekly broadcast called Dissident Thinker for members and Rockfin subscribers only. We will continue to fight the good fight come hell or high water. Thank you for listening.